Welcome to the Bobby O Show. I'm Bob O. Potsner with a bit of a laryngitis, but I'll do my best I can today on today's show. And before we get to our very special guest, Deb Gilman, she's a PhD from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania on psychology, I would be remiss if I didn't raise the factual issue that 248 years ago on July 4th, 1776, we had Independence Day now because of the Declaration of Independence, which gave us independence in the United States of America. And I think it's very important that we remember what it is that we're celebrating and what it is that we have. We could not have open and free television shows like I have on Comcast Channel 23 if we didn't have freedom of speech that we have today. And I think it's imperative that I read at least a couple of sentences about the Declaration of Independence, because it's really critical, I think, to understand where we are and how we are and what the future can be, so that we can get into the topic of today's show about babies. The phrase I want to read to you is the following. It's not the whole declaration. It says, and there's references to men, but it should be men and women, but I'm going to read it as it states in Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. The consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. We are faced in a situation where we have two candidates, which I think the polls indicate nobody really prefers the candidates, but we have the choices we now have, which is Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump. And we have the one candidate, they're both old. One is 81 and one's 78. They're both old, but one is old and occasionally apparently not coherent as I'd like to be, and one is a convicted criminal, and you have to choose what we want in America. So I make that statement without trying to be a political statement, to let you remind yourselves that we are the United States of America. God bless America. And with that introduction, I want to go to a topic that I'm really excited about having with the guest, Deb Gilman, PhD. Last time we did a show together, Deborah and I talked about baby-proofing a marriage. And today we're going to talk about how do you communicate to a young child that there's going to be another baby coming into the family unit. Deborah, would you like to say hello, please?
Hi, thank you so much for having me back, Bob. I'm so excited to be here and talking about this really important situation that happens in a lot of people's lives.
Deborah, can you just tell us real briefly your background, what your studies are, what your PhD is in about a minute or so, just to kind of give you some credibility to our audience again?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a clinical psychologist. My PhD is in psychology with a focus on parenting, child development, and families. Particularly attachment is a lot of the background of not only the work that I have done, but the research that I've done as well.
And Deborah and I did not know each other until about a month ago when she spoke at a seminar in Quinnipiac University. And I was so overwhelmed by her articulate nature and the things she had to say that I just had to have her on the show. And now she's part of my Pittsburgh triumvirate. And welcome you to the show. Deborah, can you talk a little bit about, as you start, about some of the cognitive developmental issues of young children, let's say 3 years of age and younger, so people understand, those who didn't know, and remind those who did know, the differences in children as they grow older, and that would impact what you tell the child about when the new baby's coming into the unit of the family.
Yeah, for sure. So if you've ever been around a toddler, like let's think like 2 to 5, right? You see that they form connections in their brain cells at an incredibly fast pace. They are learning and adapting quickly. You may say, sometimes like an oopsie swear word, and suddenly your kid is using it constantly because they're learning how to adapt quickly. This also means, though, that more complex concepts, abstract concepts about time, about growth, about cause and effect can take some time to grasp. They may not understand them right away. So the idea of a baby growing inside a belly can be confusing. The other thing about the toddler brain is that this prefrontal cortex that we often think about emotional regulation, planning, executive functioning, impulse control, it is just beginning to develop. So there might be a lot of tantrum, not a lot of reasoning with the baby or with the toddler, I mean, because they really don't have that abstract logical, I mean, that prefrontal cortex development yet. So they can't control all of those things and understand, again, what's happening. They're also pretty egocentric. So they see the world from their own perspective and they struggle to grasp the idea that someone else, maybe new baby coming in, would need some attention or would need some space or would even need some of their own things. And I think finally, one of the biggest challenges is that language skills are just developing. So vocabulary is, although it's growing, it's still kind of limited. They don't really understand a lot of complex sentences, but they're trying to. And also their ability to communicate to parents can be really difficult. So we need to think about that when we're talking to our toddlers about the idea of a new baby coming into the house.
I recently read a book by Jen Psaki, who was former press secretary to President Biden, and she also worked in prior administrations. And she wrote the book talking about communications. One of her major themes is know your audience. Know your audience. And the reason I wanted to have you talk about this, like the emotional development and cognitive development of a child, is because you're not talking to a 16-year-old kid if you're talking to a 2 or 3-year-old, and you have to keep that in mind as you tell them things that can be very difficult. Even when some kids get a dog in the family, they get a little jealousy between them and the dog. So I want to thank you for that information.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you take us now to your next step in the presentation?
Yeah, so really, when we're thinking about the announcement is really important for not only the baby, the toddler, but it's important for the family as a whole. And so when we're thinking about making the big announcement, we obviously there's not a one size fits all approach, right? But you want to be open, you want to be honest, and you want to use that simple language and age appropriate terms. So you may say something like, our family is growing. There's a tiny baby that is going to come and live with us. They might be confused about where the baby comes from, but you can keep it simple and say, the baby is growing big and strong inside mommy's tummy. And you can even, after you tell your toddler about it and you're going to celebrate with other family members or start telling neighbors and other people, you can appoint your toddler as the announcement helper to give them a big job to do and make everybody happy, because toddlers love attention, right? And so if they start announcing to everybody that the baby's coming, now they've embraced it in a positive way and they can be the announcement helper and they can start to understand in their own words, what does that mean? And you'll be able to give them some words together to talk about it so that they can really understand that baby is coming. But
My,
yeah, go ahead.
my parents are a different generation. And when my little sister was going to be, my mother was pregnant with my little sister, I was told the stork was bringing the baby. And we didn't have any sophisticated discussion about those particular items. And the other thing I want to say to you is that I have a 28-month-old grandson, and my daughter's pregnant with another child. And we had a gender reveal recently. And my grandson thought the baby was going to come out of the cake. And we all thought that was cute, but I think that's part of the developmental understanding we're talking about at that young age.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's that they take everything very literally, right? So you want to make sure that when you're speaking to them, that they're understanding in terms that take into account the fact that what they're hearing may not be what you're intending to say, and that time is a very limited concept. So again, taking step by step ways to help them understand and prepare for baby is going to be really important. And there are a lot of different ways that we can help toddlers understand what is happening as, mommy's belly is growing and the family is preparing, and even the house is changing. The physical space around them is changing. So there's, you can involve them in the process by reading books together, books about babies and families and siblings. And you can point to those pictures and help them understand what's going on. There's a lot of different things you can do in terms of pretend play. So they can practice taking care of the baby, singing, changing diapers, putting baby in the stroller, even just giving baby like safe touch. That's something that's kind of is important to practice with your toddler before the baby arrives, like how to touch the baby and how to gently play with the baby. While the baby is in utero, you can encourage gentle touches as well. So it's at, around like the 4 to 5 month period, about 20 weeks, you should be able to feel those belly kicks. And it's different for everyone, of course. But as soon as you're able to feel the kicks and your toddler could feel the kicks as well, you could have the toddler touch the baby, talk to the baby, sing to the baby, even play calming music for the baby. And this starts that big brother, big sister tasks that they're able to prepare for in some really great ways.
Deborah,
And
on your screen right now, if you go back to the screen for a second, Candy Ann, there were two things that I thought were pretty interesting. One, you said watch educational shows or movies.
yes,
There's a show that my grandson, and I can't mention his name because my daughter has prohibited from my discussing him at all on this show, but it says watch educational shows or movies. There's a show he's been watching a little bit. I don't think it's much anymore, but maybe 3-4 months ago, a show called, I think it's Miss Rachel. I don't know if you heard of Miss Rachel.
oh yes, I've heard of Miss Rachel.
Yeah, and I saw they had things about diversity in a nice way, a lot of different subtle things. And I don't know if there's a show that she put out or if there's other shows like that, but I think those kinds of shows are really very instrumental. And in fact, if there's not a show about this topic, Deborah, then you and I are going to put together a show for these kids to explain that. The other thing, back on that screen one more time, you had about the room. And one thing that I've observed with my daughter is that the discussion between the grandson now existing is we're making you a new, quote, big boy room, unquote. And so there's a little focus upon that. Any comment about either of those things?
Yeah, well, first, the shows, there are educational shows out there, and I do have a little graphic for that. Daniel Tiger Neighborhood has two really good shows about Daniel's mom is going to have a new baby. Kailu, I don't know if anybody watches Kailu, but there is one where Kailu becomes a big brother. Bluey is a very, very popular show right now with a lot of kids. And so there is a whole show about for Bluey and their family having a baby. And then Peppa Pig and the Bubble Guppies actually also have shows. And I'm sure there are a lot more. If you go through, your streaming services, you'll be able to find some. But I really love the Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood ones in particular. It comes from the Sesame Street Workshop. And I think they handle those topics so well and open up conversation between you and your child. So don't just sit your child in front of the TV, actually sit with them and talk with them and explain what's going on with your family as they're watching the character. It helps them feel some kind of connectivity, like, oh, there's some common humanity in this, is what adults would say, right? Common humanity. But they understand that they're not alone in this, and that, the feelings that maybe some of the characters on TV, mom and dad can talk to with the toddler to say, are you experiencing these things? Or even just being mindful of these things could be things that the toddler could experience when thinking about new baby. The other thing that you mentioned, Bob, was the space, right? And how your physical space changes. And a lot of times when a new baby is coming, this is also the time where parents are maybe making a big boy or big girl room for the older sibling, which again gives them this sense of, I'm growing and I am empowered and I can, have these tasks in a different way, and that I can help take care of the baby. And so helping to decorate the baby's room, if the child has a particular special toy that they're afraid that the baby is going to play with or take from them, being able to go out with parents and buy toys or buy little things to decorate the baby's room will allow that space and for them to understand that they're still going to have their things and baby is going to have their things. And it allows them to maybe accept the fact that there will be a new person living in the home, but their own relationship with mom and dad, their own physical space in the home, their own toys in the home can still belong to them, because that jealousy piece and that confusing piece might come up for younger kids.
Seeing the little bear behind your left shoulder, which is a certain critical part of your show as always. This may sound odd and sort of tangentially related, but my daughter also has a dog whose name is appropriately Duke, and his name was Duke before they bought the dog, so I did not influence that. But we noticed that after the first grandson was born, that Duke seemed, I don't want to say the word depressed, but seemed different. And we've been told by the vet, et cetera, that sometimes animals can feel sort of like a way. And this show is not necessarily about how we treat the animals differently, but have you observed or heard of things where pets, like a dog, can be impacted by the arrival of a new child? There's a little thought about that.
Yeah, there is some psychology behind that, right? Like dogs are animals too, people are animals. And so we have sort of similar reactions to things. And I do know that there are things that people do to prep the pets for new baby. Like they bring home the scent of the baby from the hospital, and they actually talk to the dog and get the dog prepared to understand the physical space and the new baby coming in. And I think that's just because it's nature. It's our human behavior to feel really connected to our caregivers and our people, and feel a little bit jealous or a little bit infringed upon if something else is coming in and trying to take up that emotional space for us.
How about a little discussion, please, about now the baby's born and mom comes home from the hospital or however the arrangement worked out. How about once that happens, what do you recommend and what thoughts should be given into the baby's now arrived and now it's the reality?
There's probably a lot to think about, especially like managing the emotions, because you're right. Now it has happened. Like that abstract thing that was growing in mommy's belly is now here. And so there is that connection between, what mom and dad were preparing us for and what's really happening now. So you want to make sure that you acknowledge the feelings that the toddler is having. It's normal for our little ones to feel a range of emotions. They may be jealous, they may be scared. And so reassuring them that, it's normal to feel that way, and give their emotion a name. Again, toddlers are just learning all of these things. They might not have vocabulary for what they're experiencing. So to say it seems like you're feeling a little sad that mommy has to feed the baby and you want me to play with you. And you can explain those emotions and explain the feelings that they're having. So you feel like very attuned with your toddler, even while you're having to give a lot of attention to the newborn. And then acknowledge that it's normal to feel that way. It's normal to feel nervous about sharing your toys or about sharing mommy's attention. And then validate them in a really positive way that will always love you just as much. You don't have to share your toys if this is something that's special to you. And I think just being very supportive of whatever it is that they're going through. And again, giving them those little tasks and little things that emphasize their new role as the big brother or sister can be really empowering and help and making them feel really important, and also getting attention from parents, which is, again, children, they really, really thrive on attention. So any way you can give them positive attention to show them that they're having a very important role in the family, even if it feels like, new baby is taking up a lot of the time.
One of the great developments in my lifetime, I think, is that we have developed family law, Family Leave Act type of thing, so that it's not just on mommy's shoulders, it's on daddy's shoulders too. And I think you would know better than I, but you talked about emotions, but there's also a lot of emotional pressures on the primary caregiver. And our society's rightfully changing so that both parents are involved in the process, assuming there are two parents involved in the process. And talking about the emotional situation, I think we should talk a little bit about the emotion of mom, because there's things like postpartum depression and those kinds of things. But I think you said you have two children. I have two. Mine are older than yours, but when they're infants, and actually as they get older, they're even more infants sometimes. But there's a lot of pressure if a mom's got a 3-year-old and a new baby. the inclination is going to be more attuned to the child and the younger child. And if they're both crying or hungry or whatever, it's a lot of pressure on the primary caregiver, assuming there is a primary. So what suggestions and thoughts do you have about making sure that the emotions of the parents are dealt with as well, so that you're not getting depression developing and that kind of thing? I guess it would be called baby proofing a marriage part 2.
Correct, correct. I think the big thing is being a team and really tag teaming together. And it can be, as a mom, my son was 2 when I had my daughter. Like, actually, he was 25 months actually when we had our daughter, and so there was a little bit of even guilt that I felt, that I wanted to keep having that connection that I had with my son and make sure that it was as strong as it needed to be, especially in those early days. So what my husband and I did is we really took turns with my daughter so that we could have one-on-one time each with my son. And bedtime for me with my son, and if anyone has a parent, that those bedtime moments are really, they capture a lot of attachment stuff. So we would make sure we took turns putting him to bed so that I could have that time with him and he could be, with the new baby, and vice versa. So we both had that experience of making sure that our son felt like he had that one-on-one time with us, and especially at those really important key moments where the sensitive and responsivity helped him to know that he was still securely attached to us and that we still loved him. There can other be rituals that you could have, like sweet routines that you do together with the older toddler, and also making sure that you're taking a step back from both kids occasionally. And if you have support being able to come in, that would be great, so mom and dad, or mom and mom, or dad and dad can really bond together as a couple as you have another child coming into the mix, because it is more stressful. It feels like you don't have a lot of time to do the things that you need to do just to take care of the 2 kids, take care of yourself, and take care of your adult relationship. Oh my gosh, right? It's a lot of things. So making sure that there's really connecting rituals built into your routine for everybody, and making sure that you're prioritizing that is super important.
What's also unfair, and this may sound a little political, but so what? We have to talk about reality. Our society is unfair on women. And I think I resent that. And I can imagine you as a lady resent it even more. And that is, I don't know any woman who's returned to work after her family leave, whatever, who doesn't spend every day in the office. Now we have more remote than we did in past, but still you're in the office a lot. And the pressure and the feeling, wait a minute, should I be home with my child? Am I doing the wrong thing? Whatever. And it just strikes me, and I look forward to your comment, I'm sure you have some thoughts on this, that somehow in our society, we put extra pressure on the woman back to work if she's working, and the pressure she feels. But yet we put in our society, women do not have choice of their bodies. And so I just wanted you to talk about that. I think it connects here, and it's coming from a man's perspective. And I have a lot of regard for you and others in the Pittsburgh area about and elsewhere about that. What do you have? Any comments you want to make, or no comments? You can be on your own.
No, I mean, I think I do. I mean, the hard thing is that having a baby takes a big toll on your body. And so just being able to do the things that you need to do after you have the baby to take care of yourself just individually to heal takes a lot of time. And that's what's the best birth, like I had 2 cesarean sections, so that's a whole nother show. But I think that it certainly, I did go back to work a lot sooner with my son. I had much more choice with my daughter. My son I had while I was still on my fellowship, and I got 6 weeks to before I had to come back. But they were very flexible about me sometimes staying home before we even had Zoom or any of those things, to do the things that I needed to do to heal. But women, we in a society, we really have a lot. We have to, do the things that we need to do to nurture our baby. So continuing to, if you're breastfeeding, eat, you have to eat several times a day. You have to make sure that you're pumping your milk. If you're not home with the baby, you have to make sure you have somewhere to freeze that or refrigerate it while you're, at work and away from baby. So there's a lot of responsibility in addition to just the work responsibilities that you have. And not every workplace is set up to accommodate that for women. Again, as a psychologist who was working in a children's hospital with families and children, they absolutely prioritize not only my physical health, but my mental health and my baby's health. But we really have to think about that in our society in terms of what are we doing to promote maternal health pre and post baby, and how does that shape what happens with our children and how they thrive and grow and develop. There is a huge connection between both, and we need to really make sure that we are making the right choices to have things in place that protect that for our children, but especially for our parents and also for fathers. I mean, if you have a spouse who's struggling and having difficulty postpartum, it is going to put a lot of load on you. And I don't think that society recognizes even the efforts that a dad has to put into place after there's a new baby. They're just expected to go to work and do the grind and be performing at this top place. But there's pressures that they have as well. And also, I would think the bonding that they want to have with the baby isn't always supported
Well,
in the workplace as well.
we only have like 2 minutes left, but I just tell you a quick funny vignette. My son was a football player in high school and also was in the jazz band, and my daughter was a ballerina all through high school, 5 days a week, whatever. And I would go to all their activities. And there was a certain judge who's now retired, Judge Axelrod. If I had a court case going on or whatever, I'd say, Your Honor, I get to tell you, please, or ask you, please, can I leave a little early today? And it got to the routine where the judge would say, okay, Attorney Opatzner, is it the kid playing football or the lady playing ballet? And that was sort of always a joke in the courthouse about that. But you make a good point about it's two people involved. And I think you and I are going to be doing some more shows, but another show will be helping people we've talked about two-parent families. What we haven't talked about is the pressures on a single parent situation and what kind of financial and emotional and psychological help exists for those people who are not as fortunate as perhaps you and I are to have had the ability to do different things to help out. And we'll do that maybe in another show down the road. Deborah, you are terrific. You teach me so much. And I learned a lot in my prep, and I'm buying those 2 books that you told me I should buy to read about baby situation. And it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so very much. This has been Bob.